Get started. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for joining. Welcome, Katya and Julie. Hi. For those who don't know me, my name is Shannon Graham, and I'm the Assistant Clinical Director at Chesapeake Mental Health Collaborative, which we affectionately call CMHC for short. CMHC is a group practice of wonderful clinicians, many of whom are on this call today. And in the spirit of professional growth and development, we try to offer monthly, so at minimum once per month, events that we open to both our clinicians at CMHC and also the broader clinical community. And we do that for two reasons. One, continuing education is a core value for our group. I'll ask if you're not on mute to please mute your microphones. Thank you. Okay, so yes, we value continuing education, and so we offer these events for growth purposes, but we also really value community. And we notice that in our field, particularly in private practice, our work can be quite isolating at times, right? Sometimes we can get stuck in the silo of just seeing clients and not really interacting with other providers. So we like to offer these to the larger community and even offer a sense of fellowship in the beginning to just chat about cicadas or Friday or allergies. So thank you all for being here and for being a part of our community. The last reason that we offer these events is they provide an opportunity to raise funds for our Nature Scholarship Program. So Chesapeake Mental Health Collaborative is one of the leaders in Maryland and hopefully in the country at integrating the healing powers of the natural world into our work as psychotherapists. And this past April, we launched our Center for Nature Informed Therapy, CNIT, another acronym. And we invite all of our speakers to donate part or all of their honorarium to our fund. And we also invite participants to donate to that fund. The reason we have the fund at all is because, unfortunately, most insurance plans do not cover nature-informed work. And so we like to make our offerings accessible to as many people as possible, and the scholarship fund helps us do that. Okay. So without further ado, I will read our lovely presenter's bio today, Dr. Michelle Pierce, and I've also pasted it in the chat in case you'd like to follow along. So Michelle Pierce, Dr. Pierce, is a professor at the University of Maryland Graduate School and a clinical psychologist. She is also a board-certified health and wellness coach, a writing and wellness facilitator, a researcher, and a night bloomer. She is passionate about helping people achieve their wellness goals and live balanced, thriving lives. Sorry, guys, my screen is not cooperating. All right, her clinical and coaching practices focus on using the connection between mind, body, and spirit to improve health and obtain optimal well-being. Night Bloomers, 12 Principles for Thriving in Adversity, not Resilience, Adversity, is her third book. When Dr. Pierce isn't writing, you can find her salsa dancing or hiking in the woods. Love that. So welcome to Dr. Pierce, and I hope you all enjoy today's presentation.
Thanks so much, Shannon. So Emily, I feel your pain. I also woke up with very bad allergies. So you've got allergy voice today. I will do my very best with you. I'm delighted to be here. Carrie, thanks so much for facilitating this. And I'm going to try to share my screen here. Okay. Slideshow. All right. And I'm going to try to bring you all up at the top so I can still see a few of you. Okay, let's go back. Everyone can see the slides. We're good. Excellent. Okay. So I've called this talk today, Blooming in the Dark, helping clients to transform through adversity. But here's the caveat. So yes, I think you're going to learn some fun things that you can use with your clients, but this is for you. This is an experiential workshop for you. I firmly believe that we are the instruments of healing in the therapy room. And let's admit, we've just gone through a really tough year. We're still in a tough year. So it wasn't just our clients who've been having a hard time, we've had a hard time. So I really invite you to use this workshop today for your wellness. And then what you find helpful, then you could probably, pass it along to your clients. But this is for you. My number one goal is to give you a different perspective on times of adversity and some empirically based tools to help you move through that adversity. And as Shannon mentioned, I published a book last September called Night Bloomers, 12 Principles for Thriving in Adversity. And I still can't believe the timing, because clearly when you write a book, it's a long process. And I had no idea that 2020 and COVID was going to happen. So it feels like a sort of divine timing for that book to come out. And that's what I'm really going to base our workshop on today, this concept of blooming in the dark, which I'll explain shortly. So here's what we'll do together. We're going to talk first about why your perspective matters so much. And then I'll get into what are the 12 principles for blooming in the dark. We're going to talk about why journal, why use journaling as a tool for healing and transformation. I'll share some of the research on that. Then I'm going to give you time for your own blooming in the dark journaling exercise. So if you don't have it already, grab some paper, a journal, a pen. That's the only thing you're going to need for this workshop, but you will need that. We're going to spend about 10, 12, 15 minutes at the end, depending on how much time we have on that. And then I'll finish up with some blooming in the dark journal guidelines, and we'll open it up for questions if you have any. The other thing I like to do, I like to make this interactive. So I know it's early in the morning. I know it's Friday. We're all struggling with allergies. But if you have things to say, just feel free to unmute yourself and say something. Shannon's going to look at the chat box for me. Oh, I'm hearing something. So if you can mute yourself, that would be great. If you have something to say and you put it in the chat box, I can't see it. I still haven't figured that out with Zoom when I'm in presenter mode. So Shannon will monitor the chat box and just interrupt me. Okay, so I wasn't sure how large of a group, we're not that big. So actually you can unmute yourself if you'd like. I'd love to know, especially this first question, do you use journaling personally as a tool for your own wellness, and or do you use it as a clinical tool? You're all on mute and I can only see 5 of you at the top, so just go ahead and shout it out.
I use it for myself, but not consistently. I find that I go to it when things are really, really tough. And when things are feeling better, I tend to just neglect it. But and clinically, I often encourage clients to do it. And I will give journaling prompts, especially for clients who are already journalers, or it's very clear that that's part of how they want to process things. So I would say in both professionally and personally, I use it inconsistently.
That's great. Thanks, Ellen. Me too. I've said often, if someone read my journals, they think I'd had the worst life because I'm only just recording the things we need to process.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share?
Yes, we have a message in the chat from Mira. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name, Mira. I always recommend it to my clients, and I journal when I need to process something heavy or confusing. I'd like to journal more often.
Great. Great. Okay. So I want to warm us up on that note with some journaling. Just take 2 minutes. I want you to take 2 minutes and write down, what is your definition of resiliency? What does it mean to be a resilient person? Let me take another 30 seconds or so and finish that up. Okay, do I have any brave souls that would like to share their definition of resiliency?
I'll share.
Great.
This came out of my non-dominant hand. When
Okay.
I'm really wanting to access something deep, I use my non-dominant hand to allow things to go and be as they are and continue to do the things that take care of myself
Mm,
at the same time.
I like that. So there's some acceptance in there. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll go. I wrote
Okay.
being emotionally aware, being able to sit with uncomfortable feelings, be optimistic that hardships can bring growth and change.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Hang on to those. We're going to come back to that in a few slides. So I want to know, when you look at this picture, what do you see? Feel free to call it out, put it in the chat box. Shannon will let me know what you put in the chat box. So when you look at this, what do you see?
A girl looking off into the distance.
Okay.
Kevin says a young girl. Julie says a young woman.
Okay.
Vivian
Can you all see
says
my,
girl with the bonnet.
yeah, can you all see my cursor?
Yes.
So here's the young girl, right here. Her eye would be here, her little nose, her chin. But how many of you also saw the ugly old woman? This is her eye, kind of a hooked nose, long chin. Here's her smile here. Yeah. So there's a young woman here and an ugly old woman here. Yeah. So this is a perceptual illusion. I first saw this in my Psych 101 class, and I was both fascinated and really disturbed that there was something that was right before my eyes and I couldn't see it. I could not see it until someone pointed it out to me. Now, of course, it's been years now that it's been pointed out. When I look at this, I flash between both, right? I see the young woman, I see the old woman, and forever on, when you guys see this in the future, you'll see both. But here's the point. Your perception determines your reality. When your perception was there was just a young woman there, that's all your reality was. I've expanded your perception, and now you've got an expanded reality. This is really important when we're going through times of adversity and suffering. Your perspective matters. It doesn't just change what you see, it changes what options are available to you. It changes how you feel. It changes whether you're feeling hopefulness or despair. It changes the possibilities that are available to you. So today I want to present a different perception or possibility, perspective on adversity. And you can, or you don't have to choose it, but you'll always know it exists. And that becomes a hopeful way for us to get through adversity. It also makes you an active participant in your transformation. Because I think one of the things that really goes when we're going through adversity is that sense of control, right? And this is one way to have more of a sense of control. I can control what my perception is of this adversity and then the choices I can make as I walk through it. So let's talk about this new perspective, what I call blooming in the dark. So I'll tell you where that came from. It was 2013, and my husband had just announced that he wanted a divorce, and it was devastating. Out of the blue, didn't expect it, sort of worst case scenario for me. And so I was in clinic shortly after. I was seeing clients and trying to focus on my clinical work. And a friend sent me a text message. And it was this picture of a beautiful pink flower. It looked really similar to this one. And the text message said, "Night blooming cactus. I've been watering this cactus for years, and it finally bloomed last night." My first thought was like, what? There's flowers that bloom in the dark? Like, I'd never heard of this. And my next thought was like, like there are flowers that require the dark to bloom. And then my final thought was, oh my goodness, I think there are people that also require the dark to bloom. And I'm one of them. I am a night bloomer. And my hunch is that several of you on the call are also night bloomers, as are your clients. And we actually need the dark times in life to grow and transform and to become all that we were meant to be. And it doesn't mean that we're going out seeking darkness or that what got us into the dark is good or right. I mean, this past year is a great example. None of us wanted this, but the dark times in life are inevitable. And so I see them as a sacred opportunity, not a guarantee for growth, but an opportunity that if we'll harness skillfully, that we can actually propel ourselves farther than we could have if the darkness had never come. And this is based on the concept of post-traumatic growth. Where struggling and going through challenging situations can actually have positive outcomes. So again, we're not denying that it's hell when you're walking through it, right? But that there is this possibility of really wonderful positive things at the end. So I call that blooming in the dark. And let me just pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions or comments on this. No? Okay. So let's go back to your definition. You wrote down your definition of resiliency, and I'm going to compare that to blooming in the dark. And it's funny because Shannon and I had some email exchanges last week, and we actually changed the title. She put resiliency in the title. I'm like, hey, actually, it's not resiliency. Blooming in the dark is different than resiliency. So APA, the American Psychological Association, defines resiliency as bouncing back or adapting well to adversity. And blooming in the dark includes that idea of resiliency, but it's more than that. And I'm going to give you the example. You see these springs here to illustrate why it's more than that. So imagine you've got a spring in front of you on your desk or a table in front of you, and you push it down really hard on the table. When you lift up your hand, what's going to happen to that spring? Just call it out. What happens to the spring when I lift up my hand?
It'll bounce back.
Does it bounce up?
Maybe.
Maybe, maybe. So here's the difference. If I'm resilient, I push, all that weight goes down on that spring and it pops up and it goes up and it comes right back down and lands in the exact same spot. That's resiliency. I bounce back. Blooming in the dark is all this pressure gets exerted, pushed down on me. And when it's lifted, that spring doesn't just come up, it propels forward. And now it lands several feet forward on my table. That's becoming more than. That's using that force that came and made me smaller and weaker and less than. That very force is what propelled me up and forward in life. That's blooming in the dark. That's post-traumatic growth. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I just think, thank goodness that happens. Like, thank goodness that we have that capacity and that's available. I mean, this is completely the heart of what, I don't know, I think just drives me in the work that we do. And it makes me the most excited for clients and for myself. And it's the thing that makes me feel empowered, that knowing that this is, available to us.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Me too. I love the research showing that post-traumatic, here PTSD, we work with clients who have PTSD, post-traumatic growth, or blooming in the dark, more common than PTSD. The research shows that we're more likely to have this post-traumatic growth than we are to have PTSD. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people don't know that this possibility exists. Myra, you're one of the 4 I can see on my screen. I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, it's actually Mira.
Mira.
So it makes me think of the Dark Night of the Soul, and lots of people have written about that, Thomas Merton and others. And actually, I'm getting this feedback. of my own voice. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound
Okay.
great here.
So it just reminds me of how when people have like spiritual experiences where they go to a really, really dark place, great despair, and then they're able to come out of it with the resiliency and the growth and be in a completely different place, like go through a huge transformation, lots of insight, lots of clarity, seeing their life in a totally different way and making huge changes.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy.
And I think that's like a more extreme example.
I like that example a lot. And I think it's one of the neat things that we do as therapists is that we give space for people to be in the dark. We sit with them, we provide them with hope, but we don't go into the darkness and try to yank them out, right? Like, this is a terrible thing you're here and let me get you out as fast as possible. No, part of what we do is sit with, because we know that what's going on this time can produce these positive things. So it's a being with, it's supporting, it's giving the tools, and us knowing that this person, because they went through this, not in spite of, but because they're going through this, can actually have these more positive outcomes in their future. Yeah. Any other thoughts before I move on?
Yes, in the chat, Kevin says the definition is so hopeful. She loves the blooming in the dark concept. And then Katya says, yes, indeed, it is a wonderful concept and encouraging.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, guys. I'm glad it resonates. So I'm going to read a short excerpt. Again, I woke up with allergy voice, so let's see how well it goes. But I wanted to read you a page and a half from the book. And this section is from a place called Don't Waste Your Sorrows. Here it goes. A friend gave me more than a Band-Aid one day when she sent me a quote from the well-known Reverend and scholar, Dr. Timothy Keller. Here's the quote. How you respond to the troubles in your life will go a long way toward whether or not you ever develop courage, ever develop patience, ever develop compassion, ever develop sobriety and humility, ever develop any of those things. Here's the kicker that got me this line. Don't waste your sorrows. This created a significant change in my perspective. I had been living like a person driving a car with my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. What happened to my marriage? Why, even with the best efforts, could I not fix it? These obsessive questions and this way of viewing my situation were setting me up for a big crash. It was time to let go of the whys and start focusing on the more important questions. How was I going to move on? Who did I want to become as a result? And what did I want my life to look like going forward? Dr. Keller's words illuminate the purpose of our pain. Troubles are opportunities to become more courageous, more patient, more compassionate, more humble. We cannot develop these or other essential character virtues without going through a situation that calls for their use. For someone to call you patient, you must demonstrate patience. This means at some point you will have to wait for something, and likely that waiting will cost you something. Certainly it will cost you your time, but often waiting costs us much more than that. To be told that you are courageous means you will have to face something that is scary and uncertain. And to be called humble, you will have to give up something, such as recognition that was due to you. You see, it's not the trouble that causes us to become better people. Participating in life makes trouble inevitable, and not everyone comes out the other side in a better state. We all go down one of three roads when we encounter trouble. Trouble can destroy us, trouble can leave us unchanged, or trouble can help to transform us. It takes conscious work and determination to choose to be transformed in the midst of trouble. And we don't need to seek out suffering so that we can become more. I dislike suffering as much as the next person, and I would never have willingly chosen the painful situations that have occurred in my life. What I'm saying is that if we're experiencing trouble and suffering, we've been given an opportunity, and what we do with this opportunity is up to us. So let's look at those 12 blooming principles really quickly. So the first one is we have to set an intention to bloom. And this is like setting an anchor in the future. Who do I want to become? What do I want my life to look like at the end of this? So you're not bloomed right now. You have barely even started, but you're setting this anchor up ahead of me. Like, this is who I could be at the end of this. And I have to tell you, I really believe this is what helped me get through the divorce. When I got that text, like a week after my husband made that announcement, I decided in that moment, I was going to bloom in the dark. I was going, at the end of this, I was going to be a better woman than I was at the beginning of it. And then by setting that intention, every day I could come back to it. I wasn't blooming. I was on the floor in a mess, right? Like most of our clients, but I had a picture of who I was going to become. And that was so motivating. That gave me so much hope to keep going. So that's the first step. Set that intention. I'm going to be a night bloomer. The next step, and we do a lot of this in therapy with our clients, but it's grieving before growing. And you might be in this stage for a really long time, but this is where we feel our feelings and we express it, and we grieve, we mourn what we lost. And this is a necessary step before we can grow. And we may cycle back to this step. The next one is support your bloom. I tell people, don't go through the darkness by yourself. So when you come to therapy, that's a great way to do it. Your friends, your family, other people, but make sure you have that support around you as you're blooming. The next one, and this sounds intuitive, but when you're in the dark, you have to be able to be in the dark. And I hated this one. I hate uncertainty. I like having a plan, know what's going to happen. And being in the dark is being comfortable in the uncertainty, sort of in that limbo state. So I talk about how to do that. The next one is expanding courageously. So if we're going to become more and be propelled forward, we're going to have to expand the way we think and expand what we're doing. Small steps, courageous. I talk about, we stretch without splattering, right? So make your steps so that you're going to stretch a bit, but not that you're going to splatter. The next one is keep your mind on blooming. And this is how to use our thought processes, things like CBT, mindfulness, hopeful thinking, to help support your blooming process. The next one is wrestling with the divine gardener. And I use divine gardener as a word for God, however you want to define God. But spiritual struggles are a real part of being in the dark. Mira brought this up when she was talking about the dark night of the soul. And I think this is something that we don't talk a lot about, is that we have, our clients, us, could have real spiritual struggles when we're in the dark. So I offer a perspective in that chapter about that. The next one is fertilizing with love and gratitude. I think these are our superpowers, or our super nutrients when we're in the dark. How do we use love, and how do we use that gratitude to help us grow? The next one is minding the mess. And this is the term I use for looking back at what just happened and learning the lessons. I think of it like I'm going into a dark, maybe even dangerous mine, and there's gems in there, and I want to mine every gem out of that mine. And then when all the gems are mined, I get out. A mine is not somewhere where you live. So go in, mine the mess, get your gems, get out. Number 10 is accepting and letting go. We cannot move into the next until we've accepted. One of your definitions of resiliency was on this. I accept that this has happened. Here I am. I let go of it, and then I can move into the new. The 11th one is waiting and watering, because let's face it, most of growing, most of when you think of agriculture or farmers, they're waiting, they're watering, they're patiently waiting for this harvest to come. So I talk about principles of how to be patient and how to persevere and not give up too soon. And then finally, when your bloom gets here, we celebrate that bloom. And then I talk about sharing the harvest. I mean, I really feel like getting to be here with you this morning is such an honor, because for me, this is part of sharing the harvest, right? So I went from that woman who was hoping I could bloom in the dark and set that intention, and now I'm able to share this message with you. And so that's part of the cycle of blooming, is that we get to that bloom state, we get to share the harvest with other people. I had someone ask me once, well, if I had to do just, you had to say it in 3 steps, right? What if I didn't have time for all your 12 principles? You just told me 3 steps. So I thought about it like this. I think the first thing you're doing is you're looking forward, right? And this is that first step. I set an intention to bloom. Where am I going? Who am I going to be? What's that vision I have of myself? And this results in hope. And that's the first thing we need, is hope. The second thing is now look back, right? Where was I? What mattered to me that no longer exists? This is where I'm grieving before growing. And here I think is where the healing happens. So we've got hope, we're looking back, we're getting healing. And the third one is then now I'm come back to the present and I'm living a new present. And I really believe the other 10 principles speak to how do I live a new present? And that's where we're really changing, make it simple, change what I think, change what I do. And by making changes in what we think and making changes in what we do, that's how transformation happens. That's how we get from who I am today to that fully bloomed self that I set that intention for. So I'm going to move into journaling now. I'll pause again. Were there any questions about this whole concept of blooming in the dark or any of the principles? Okay, so let's talk about journaling. So journaling, I don't mean Dear Diary, right? Some of our clients are resistant to journaling because they think it means like, Dear Diary, I went to therapy today and then I had dinner and I had a bath and I went to bed. Like, that's not really useful. This is so much more. The research is called expressive writing or reflective writing. And let me just tell you where the research all came from. Dr. James Pennebaker, some of you may have heard of him. He's kind of the guy who started this about 30 years ago. And his original experiment was with students, university students. He had two groups of students. So in the first group, they did the journaling exercise, the expressive writing. And he said to them, over the next 4 days, 20 minutes at a time, I want you to write about the most difficult thing you've ever been through, most traumatic thing, most stressful thing, maybe something you've never talked about before. I want you to write about it for 20 minutes for these next 4 days. Okay. Second group was the neutral condition. He said to them, I want you for the next 4 days, 20 minutes at a piece, describe like the room you're sitting in, right? So that's pretty boring, pretty neutral. We didn't expect a lot of emotions to come up from that. And he was right. So at the end of those 4 days, he surveyed them, and guess who felt the worst, right? The ones who were writing about the traumatic event, they felt pretty poorly. The other ones in the neutral didn't feel so much. However, a few months later, when he gave the same surveys and followed up with them, guess who was doing the best? It was the group that did the actual journal writing, expressive things about the trauma. Emotionally, they felt better. And physically, they were doing better because he measured how often did you go to the student health service, sort of as a measure of, were you sick? And the group that wrote about those traumatic things, they visited the doctor less often. And so from here, we started these ideas like, yes, there's something about getting out these thoughts and this trauma in my head and putting it on page. It's very healing. And so over the next 30 years, we found these sorts of things. And I draw your attention to a few of them, as I think they're really important, especially during this time of COVID. Strengthens the immune system, lowers stress hormones, induces relaxation. So it's obviously, it's not a catch-all. It's not like I'm saying, journal and you won't get COVID or these other negative things, but the journaling, there's something very healing about getting the words onto the page. A few things to keep in mind as you're engaging in journaling yourself or you're explaining this to your clients. Remember that it was writing about those emotional topics, not the neutral or superficial topics that resulted in the healing and the beneficial outcomes. So we have to be courageous enough to write about the things that really matter, maybe the things that are scary. The next thing he found, the people that did the best wrote about facts and feelings, not one or the other. So it wasn't enough to say like, I went through this really awful thing. It was, I went through this really awful thing and it made me feel X, Y, Z. Or it wasn't just like I wrote about my feelings. So in your writing, keep that in mind. It's good to write about what happened and what you're feeling about what happened. As I mentioned, it could be a temporary increase in distress. Now, many people found that that was worth it given the long-term outcomes. Some of these outcomes take time. If we're talking about strengthening of your immune system, we're talking about writing more than once and writing over time. And then there's many reasons why writing may work. We've got different perspective. We've got labeling emotions, assigning meaning. We're creating a beginning, a middle, and an end to our story. And as those of you who do trauma work, we know how important it is to get to that end of the story. So writing is one way as we can craft an ending that this thing didn't just start, I'm not just in it, but it also ended. So Based on all of that, I want to transition. I'm going to give you 15 minutes for this next exercise. This is your chance to experience this, the journaling and the blooming in the dark. So here are the prompts I've created for you. And I'm going to say you could use one prompt for the whole 15 minutes. You could use all four. You could go off on a tangent and not use any of these. But here are my suggestions for you. And this really has to do with that first step, setting an intention to bloom. So let me read them for you. First one, how do I want to be, or how do I want to show up in life during this difficult time? And when I say difficult time, maybe it's COVID. Maybe it's this last over a year that we've been through in this quarantine and all this craziness. Or maybe it's something really different, has something to do with COVID. This is up to you. You write about whatever difficult time you'd like. Next one, what am I learning about myself, or what am I learning about life that I want to implement going forward? What positive growth might be possible for me as a result of this experience? So maybe it's hard to even imagine that there's gonna be anything positive, but sort of hypothetically, what might be possible for me as positive growth? And then finally, how will I know that I bloomed in the dark? And what do I need to do to set myself up to bloom? The other caveat here is I'm not going to ask you to explain what you wrote, because I really want you to go honest and go deep. Also know that this is being recorded. So write for your eyes only. At the end, I'll probably ask you, hey, like, what was that like? You know, what came up for you? But I am not going to ask you to share your answers. So this really is just for you. Questions, I'm going to give you about 15 minutes, but any questions before we start? Okay, let's go. It's taking 2 more minutes to finish up. I'm finishing up that last thought, that last sentence. So I'm curious, I'm not going to ask what you wrote about, but what was that exercise like for you? Yes, Sarah. Oh,
For me, I recognized how much my thoughts just kind of go in circles when I'm contemplating a difficult situation, a dark place where I am. Whereas journaling really helps me to move things forward, things evolve rather than just keep going in circles. So that was one of the things that really struck me about journaling.
excellent. Thanks for sharing that. It's absolutely correct. It does help us to get out of that cycle, that ruminating cycle. Yeah, so good. Adina, did I hear you trying to speak to?
Yeah, thanks. It was so insightful,
Hmm.
kind of like peeling away things and very revealing.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. My guess is, I think I got in 12 minutes just because of the time of our session. My guess is there's probably still lots more to write. So if you don't feel like you're done later today, maybe this weekend, taking some time to finish that up. Good. Anyone else? And just feel free to speak out because sometimes I can't see you on the screen if your hand is up.
It's okay. This is Vivian.
Hi, Vivian.
Yeah, I don't think. Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
It's good to be here. I found it very centering. You know, I think we in this field, I think about myself, obviously we all do, but you know, I really got a moment just to dive into my thoughts about me. You know, not about other people and how they're doing and, you know, what I can do to help, but about me and how I can help me. So it's very centering. Thank you.
I'm so glad you took that time. Good. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I think that it's really helpful to kind of locate where I am in my own process with like these questions helped me to just see sort of where I am on the map in going through, you know, my difficult time. And so I think I know I think when you're in it, that's much harder to do, but the questions are really helpful for that. And that feels like, I don't know, that feels grounding and hopeful, and just kind of like, okay, I know where I am. You're not like in the swirl.
Yes. Yeah, such a good point. Thank you for sharing that. So I told you Penny Baker's original prompt, writing prompt, like write about the most traumatic thing that you've gone through. Interestingly, as the research has gone over the years, so people started to use it in the field of bereavement and grief and loss. And they found that that prompt itself wasn't getting as good of results. And so they started to modify it. And they found that if the prompts are very carefully crafted and specific and have to do with certain themes, then the people get the most benefit out of it. So it's why I use, at the end of each principle, so there's a chapter on every principle in the book. And then there's about 6 writing prompts that are specific to that blooming principle. And I use that research knowing that it's not just, it's helpful to say to your client, you know, maybe you want to journal about this, but it's way more helpful to say, and here is a specific prompt that gets exactly at that thing to direct your thinking, direct your writing. Yeah, excellent. I'm so glad that was helpful for you guys. So here are a few night blooming journal guidelines if you wanted to continue with this. I always suggest to people that they get their own beautiful blooming journal. You know, get something that represents this process for you to start anew. Date your entries. It's so nice to look back and see where you were. Grammar and spelling don't matter. Again, like this is for your eyes only. So don't judge or censor, correct, erase, just for your eyes. Remember to express your emotions. So we want to be as honest as possible because those are the people that got the most benefit. Again, for your eyes only. And a really helpful tip that I learned when I was first learning about journaling is keep your hand moving. So when you get stuck, you know, sometimes we're like, I don't know what to write about. And we put our pen down and we pick up the phone and then we kind of lost it. So instead of getting into that mode, just keep telling your story one word at a time. Just think one word, the next word. Sometimes you might even write, I don't know what to say next. My mind feels kind of blank. I feel kind of numb. And you're just, and then it's like, and then that makes me think of, and then you're off and running again. So just keep writing. This is, again, the book. If you thought it was helpful for yourself, you want some more journal prompts, if you thought it was helpful for any of your clients, it's online. And then so just to finish up, you know, here's how to contact me if you ever want to reach out, my email, my website. I'm also on Instagram. And just in conclusion, like we are all going to face suffering and adversity. Again, last year is a case in point. And the hopeful message is that these dark times, they don't have to destroy us. And we don't just have to bounce back to where we were before, which is resilience, but we can actually use those dark times to propel ourselves forward to become better than we were before the darkness came. And that's not in spite of the darkness, it's because of the darkness, because that's what night bloomers do. We bloom in the dark. So my great wish for you is the next time you find yourself in the dark, that you choose to bloom in the dark, and that every dark season in your life produces beauty not possible in the light. So thank you for joining us today.
Yay. Thank you, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for attending. We will send out a copy of the recording via email and also a link to our scholarship fund if you would like to donate. We appreciate you coming out today and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
It was
so
really
much.
wonderful. Thank you. Very
Welcome.
helpful.
Thank you.